All right. Okay, I'm sharing. All right, so welcome. I'm Blake Ball. I know a lot of you, maybe a couple new faces. Is anybody totally new to the Willistown Conservation Trust? All right, great, welcome.
My main sister, Kathleen, from Florida.
Oh, hey, welcome to Pennsylvania. Yeah, many different bird life in Florida than we do. That's for sure. Yeah, so tonight I just thought we would sort of do like a very shallow dive into Ornithology 101. So it really is going to be sort of a blitz. A lot of these topics, you could probably spend a whole lecture talking about, like birdsong, nesting, bird banding, but I'm going to try to sort of blitz our way through the world of birds, and with some time for questions at the end. I'll just, whoops, I can advance my slides here. So just a brief introduction to the Willistown Conservation Trust. For those who are new, we are a nonprofit land trust, accredited land trust, been around for 35 plus years. We're just 20 miles west of Philadelphia, so it's a pretty urban area. Our founder, founded this organization when she saw all of this, rampant development happening, the beautiful countryside that she loved so much. And so now the trust has established a 20,000 acre program area encompassing the Crum, Ridley, and Darby Creek watersheds. And we protected 7,500 acres to date that will never be able to be developed. So always have the habitat here for wildlife. I have to remember I have a pointer here, and actually, well, yeah. So this is just our protected lands map, and if you want to take a closer look, there's one on the wall, but you can see we are, so here we are, Russian Conservation Center. Here's Ridley Creek State Park. And then we have a mosaic of private and public lands. The private lands mostly are protected, in addition to our few nature preserves in this area. The private lands are protected through a tool called a conservation easement. So that follows the land with each successive landowner and prevents development forever. So, and over the years, we have expanded our mission to more than just protecting land, but also connecting you guys, the people, to the land through our various core activities, including habitat stewardship at our many nature preserves. We really try and model how people can interact with nature at home and make conservation happen, not just on nature preserves or state parks, but in their backyard. And, so we model the management techniques like stream side buffers and wildflower meadows and shrub habitat for birds. We have our watershed protection program housed in this building. They work at our various preserves studying the health of the waterways in partnership with the Academy of Natural Sciences, studying things like macroinvertebrate populations, which can give you an indication of your water quality. Here at Rushton Woods Preserve and Farm, you are looking out on a 6-acre regenerative farm. So it's all no chemicals, but it's really beyond organic. So we keep all of the surrounding habitat. There's wild meadows, shrub areas, and then 60 acres of forest that connects up to 250 some acres of forest, which is one of the largest contiguous tracts of forest left in Chester County. So it's really unique to have a farm within a wildlife preserve, which is modeling how we can grow food for people, not at the expense of wildlife, but actually providing habitat, inviting nature in, like farming used to be done. So Rushton Woods Preserve has all these beautiful habitats, forests, woodland, meadow. So it's a great place for our bird conservation program, which the pinnacle of that is bird banding, which occurs here on the preserve. And I will talk a little bit more about that and show some pictures of how we do that later in the talk. But essentially we're studying species abundance and diversity that use this preserve so that we can show people, this is how wildlife responds when you manage the land in this very conscientious way. So, and people come to our bird banding station from all around. It's open to the public on Thursdays during spring and fall migration, so that people can come and learn about migration, the wonder of birds, and how to help these neighbors that live in our backyard or travel through our backyard. I don't know how to get that little, there we go. Oh, I just exit out. We don't care about audio. So ornithology is, of course, the study of birds. There's more than 10,000 species in the world. Some species are gained each year, some are lost. Sometimes scientists are always working, lumping species together. So that changes, the number changes a bit, but essentially 10,000 species is the world that we get to live in right now of birds, and they are diverse. The only other organism that's as widespread as birds are microscopic. So birds here's just some of the diversity that you can see here on our preserve, from the screech owl on the upper left to the bright red scarlet tanager, the indigo bunting.
Like, I'm sorry, can you go back on screen?
Yes.
What was that bird? I can't
That-
read it.
That bird is a Cambodian tailor bird, first discovered in 2009 as a serendipitous outcome of a research program on avian influenza. And this is some of this is from the Handbook of Bird Biology, which if you really want to get into ornithology, a deep dive, that's a great resource, and it's beautifully illustrated. Cornell Lab of Ornithology is really a great resource for anybody who wants to learn more about birds. They've got online courses now ranging from Birds of Paradise to Bird Song. They're the ones that with all the apps, like the Bird Song Identification app. So really great resource. So avian distribution, as we said, they're all over Earth, but no species has a complete worldwide distribution. You can see on this map, there's more species as biology generally goes, more species near the equator where it gets warmer, in the tropical areas. That's where sees the most diversity. Fun fact, the peregrine falcon has the broadest natural breeding range. They're on every single continent except for Antarctica. This is also the fastest animal on the planet, able to reach speeds of 200 miles per hour when they do what's called a stoop, which is how they catch their prey. And then that range map there is, if I get a chance in the end, I can show you eBird, which is what birders use to really list all their sightings, and ornithologists use it because it's a great community science resource. Ornithologists can't be everywhere all the time, but there's millions and millions of birders everywhere all over the world contributing really important information on birds. And so you can get these cool range maps for species. That is one that was pulled up from eBird. And then second place of widest distribution is the lovely barn owl, which many people know and love. Very distinguished owl with that beautiful white heart-shaped face, and they're found on 5 of 7 continents. So we are not the only ones who get to enjoy barn owls. So it's common knowledge now that birds are indeed the living descendants of dinosaurs, which every time I think about that or remember that fact, I think, wow, that's pretty cool that we get to study these essentially dinosaurs. So the one common ancestor that they can trace birds back to, modern day birds, is a theropod dinosaur during the Triassic period. So 150 years ago, a descendant of modern birds basically radiated from that theropod dinosaur in evolution. So birds originated during the Jurassic period. So dinosaurs are, of course, the reptiles that ruled the earth until 66 million years ago, when the Cretaceous period was ended with the asteroid. So kind of crazy to think that birds are the living descendants of these huge reptiles. So 150 million years ago in the Jurassic, they evolved from these feathery raptor-like dinosaurs. And they weren't at all like the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, all scaly and scary. They were almost beautiful. covered in these ornamental feathers. And that's where our birds descended from. And 80 million years ago, for 80 million years, they were evolving, and there were many different types. There were beaked birds that flew across the sky with streamers. There were loon-like birds with teeth that dove. So there was a diversification of avian dinosaurs, and at the same time that there were non-avian dinosaurs, like your Stegosaurus that you think of. So then what happened, and this is a basically Jurassic Park depiction. They don't think that this T-Rex actually looked like that. But so the end of the Cretaceous was pretty morbid. The asteroid hit. 75% of the species were wiped out because of the friction from this huge asteroid hitting the atmosphere, caused all these forest fires all over the world. And then the smoke from that fire theoretically blotted out the sun for literally decades. And so most of the animals, most of the dinosaurs died off. But it turns out the toothless beaks of the avian dinosaurs offered an evolutionary advantage. They thought originally that having teeth or not having teeth made them lighter and easier to fly, but there were a lot of toothed dinosaurs that could fly perfectly fine. So the toothless beaks made it so that these avian dinosaurs had a different niche than the ones with teeth. The ones with teeth were totally carnivorous. And if you think of after the asteroid hit, all those animals dying, there wasn't much for them to eat. But if you were a vegetarian with a toothless beak, you could eke out a living eating the morsels from the forest, the seeds, nuts, berries, until those forests recovered. So our modern birds came from some of those ancestors, those toothless beaked ones. So aren't we lucky that the ones with the tooth beaks didn't make it? That would be scary. Imagine a large hummingbird with teeth. Terrifying. Not a world I would want to live in. So then, and this is the famous, a lot of people have heard of Archaeopteryx, which is the link between the theropod dinosaurs and birds, but not modern day birds. It isn't, there's still not a direct missing link to the modern birds. Archaeopteryx is just the oldest known organism that was a bird, but it was one of these ancient birds, not the modern day birds. But it still gives you an idea of how the dinosaurs evolved to birds. So this was an avian dinosaur that was discovered, a fossil, complete fossil in limestone sediment in Germany in like 1860. You could see little imprints of the feathers all around the skeletal structure. So had some bird-like traits like that. There was large brain, the sort of hollow bones, and then there were a lot of non-avian dinosaur traits that this creature still had, like the small teeth, claws at the end of the wings. So it wasn't totally, like I said, the modern day bird, but oldest known organism that was a bird. So today the avian characteristics are, they all have a beak, long neck, 2 wings, fused vertebrae, a lightweight skeletal system. Their bones are actually hollow, so everything in a bird is making them aerodynamic so they can fly, including hollow bones. And then they have beautiful song, which we'll talk about, egg laying, and feathers, of course, which the dinosaurs also had. So there's tons of adaptations that have, molded all of our various 10,000 species of birds. For example, you got the chickadee on the left there. They've got one of the largest hippocampus for their body size. That's a region of the brain that deals with hiding things and finding things. So this is a bird that's, you probably see him going to your feeder and taking seeds away. He's hiding a lot of those seeds, and then he has to remember where he's hid all those seeds. So he has a very good spatial awareness. That Lazen albatross in that middle picture, they have a special wing locking device that allows them to stay. The pelagic bird stays at sea for days on end without getting any muscle cramps. And then, of course, our beautiful hummingbirds that have bills molded to the specific flowers that they're going to. This is a little like Darwin's finches. So all these different bills allow for all of these different niches, and all of these animals, oh, I mean, all these birds eat different things. We got the flamingo here representing Florida, filter feeder down there, chiseling, dip netting, surface skimming, coniferous seed eating, grain eating, insect catching. So just this glittering diversity. And that was from a article in the Audubon magazine. There's a link there. And so niche is that term that means it's essentially the role the organism plays in the ecosystem. And it allows for different animals to occupy the same habitat, but not compete for resources, because they each have their own job. So this is an indication, this is a pictorial indication of warbler niches. So this is something that every handbook of ornithology has in it. It shows this is like in the boreal forest, these warblers breed. So you have a spruce tree, you have the Cape May warbler. Keep forgetting to use this pointer here. Cape May warbler will feed at the tops of the trees. The bay-breasted is in the central portion, and then the yellow-rumped warbler, you'll be able to see him in the lower parts of the tree, or the understory. So all these little warblers can occupy the same habitat without competing for resources, even though they all eat insects. And then you have the same sort of diversity in shorebirds. They can all occupy the same beach because they're hunting totally different. And they've got some really crazy bill adaptations. So, and this is still happening today. This is one of the largest studies in natural selection, and it's being done currently. A researcher in Chicago was studying window-killed birds. Unfortunately, millions of birds hit windows, residential and buildings, and die. And a lot of volunteer groups will collect them to do a census. And so over the past 40 years, he's collected 70,000 specimens of 52 North American species, and found that birds are actually shrinking. And that is due to climate change, because as with the warming climate, a smaller animal with larger surface area to volume ratio is going to have an easier time cooling off. So they found that birds, I mean, it might not be noticeable to, the naked eye, but measurements are showing that birds are shrinking. And then many of these are migratory birds. And so they still have to be able to have the power to get to, say, South America. And so to compensate for the smaller body size, they're noticing longer wings, because the ones that are more successful in migration with these smaller bodies are the ones that have longer wings to help power them. So climate change is essentially causing birds to shrink and wingspans to grow, was the conclusion of that study. Song and vocalization. So this is one of my favorite parts of the bird world. So birds have really two different vocalizations. There's songs and calls. So the calls you can hear year long. Those are just short, simple little chips and chirps talking to each other, maybe alerting to food or predators, like the typical chickadee-dee-dee that we all know. That's a chickadee alerting about predators. But the songs are the beautiful, loud broadcasts that are a little more complicated, longer in length. Generally the males are doing it, and now is the best time of the year to learn birdsong or just enjoy birdsong, because they're all mostly male birds are singing, and the female is just silently composing this orchestra. So she's listening, she's paying attention to, she can tell how old the male is from his song, she can tell his dialect, where he's from, how long he's been in the area, if other males are trashing him, are they singing over him, are they singing, waiting for him to finish and then singing. So she can tell his fitness by his song. She's judging a lot, determining a lot, and selecting her mate essentially based on the song. And so, and then of course the males are not only trying to attract females with their song, but they're also trying to ward off other males and announce their territory that they've claimed to other males. And so some researchers in 2012 did some studies with hormones in birdsong with some white-throated sparrows and found that during the breeding season, a female bird that hears birdsong, a male birdsong, it is the same reaction as our brains have when we're listening to pleasant music. Whereas outside of the breeding season, when she's not hopped up on estrogen, it's just a tone. There's no reaction in her brain. And then for the males, when they are full of testosterone during breeding season and they hear a male song, it's the same reaction as what happens in our brains when we're hearing scary music in a horror movie. So the males are like, oh my God, there's another male taking over. So, and here is another, a great app that I like for learning bird songs is actually, is it Audubon or iBird? I think it's iBird that shows the spectrograms. So you can look at your phone and hear the song and also see it. And visualizing birdsong can help people learn it sometimes. So spectrogram is the frequency over time. So iBird is the app. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Audubon's a good app too. It has sometimes it'll have more dialects of the birds. But the iBird is the one that shows that spectrogram, and I'll play that for you now. This is a common yellowthroat. Oh, and chimney swifts just went. So it's up and down, up and down. The mnemonic device. Oops, what did I just do? Screen sharing. What did I do? Share. Oh, I got X'd out. Slideshow, current slide. So the mnemonic device for the common yellowthroat is witchety, witchety, witchety. So let me see if I can get this one. It's not giving me the option to screen save here. Hold on. There we go. Somehow I X'd out of screen share. All right, we're back in business. Here's the black-capped chickadee. And they have a little bit more of a simple song. I always say they're saying spring, springtime.
Do you think they're reacting to this? 'Cause
Uh,
they weren't active until.
Like, what is going on? It might be. So we'll take a break from that in case we are bothering our neighbors there. So Oscine is the suborder of passerines is the largest order of birds that includes the songbirds or perching birds, and then the Oscine are the songbirds, and this includes 4,600 species. These are the ones that sing. And the way that they do this is through a structure that's a little different than ours. We have a larynx, that's our voice box. It's in our trachea and it's higher up than the birds. They use a syrinx, which is located lower, really right where the trachea branches into two bronchi. You can see right there, and then they have it enlarged here. And so their voice box is two-parted, whereas ours is just has one tube. They really have two tubes of their voice box. And so they can do things like duet with each other, operate one side versus the other, and they can make all these really crazy noises and songs because of it. And they're much more efficient than we are. 100% of the air that goes through their syrinx is used for sound, whereas only 2% of the air that goes through our larynx is used for sound. So here's a cardinal. They can span more pitches than a piano in 1/10 of a second. And they're actually switching sides of the syrinx while they're singing. Very talented. And then the wood thrush, that's our beautiful forest thrush that has a very nostalgic song. Play that for you. And they are actually duetting with themselves. That's how they make the pretty ethereal song. And again, Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a great all about birds. They've got an academy and they've got a whole bird song academy. If you want to learn more about bird song, it's one of their free information they actually have online. So bird song, there's most birds just inherit their sounds. The ones that don't have songs, like the ducks, loons, herons, hawks, flycatchers. But hummingbirds, parrots, and songbirds like warblers and sparrows, they all have to learn their song. And it's kind of a lot like a kid learning to talk. They go through a babbling phase. So I always say the process of a bird like a white-throated sparrow learning their song is like they have all of the puzzle pieces encoded in their DNA. They know all of the notes of their species song, but they don't know how it goes together. And so they have to hear the adults singing, and they start learning this even in the nest. So they hear that, and then they learn how to put the puzzle pieces together. And you can hear them doing this in the fall. Fall is a great time to hear little babies babbling because they hatched in the summer and now they're learning to live on their own and starting to practice their songs for next spring when they'll need it for breeding. And you can actually hear them piecing the puzzle pieces together in what's called the song crystallization period. And then finally, when they get it, it solidifies in their brain, and then forever they have the same song. And so this whole learning is pretty rare in the animal kingdom. It's not even in chimps, closest relatives. So it's really birds and bats and whales. So really interesting.
Do those sounds change over time? Have been noticed really that such as a study that the bird songs stay the same?
Oh, you mean like each species?
Yeah.
Generally it stays the same, but they've done some urban studies and found that because of all of the noise pollution, they have to get their songs are louder in urban environments, or they might be more simplified because nobody's hearing it. Might as well just do the simplified version. I mean, the spaces between the traffic, right? So here's a little video about the birdsong babble.
Every bird in the world makes some kind of sound, but songbirds, hummingbirds, and parrots are unique because in order to develop a proper song, they need to listen to adults, And then they have to practice, just as in humans. Remember when you were an infant just beginning to babble? Well, maybe not, but I do remember when my daughter was learning how to speak. One of her favorite dolls was Lowly Worm from the Richard Scarry books. And she loved to say, hello, Lowly, and goodbye, Lowly. Female birds looking for a mate can distinguish the perfected songs of experienced adults from the ragged songs and nonsense syllables of young birds. For example, by the time white-throated sparrows are 1 year old, they can whistle a pure old Peabody, Peabody, Peabody without variation. But during their first spring migration, young birds sound tone deaf. Their notes are thin and waver all over the place. They remind me of myself when my voice used to crack as a teenager. Fortunately, with practice and time, birds and humans ultimately get it right.
I thought that was cute. So then they've done some experiments of having birds reared in a lab, songbirds not hearing their species to see how that affects their song, and it makes it very simplified. So the one that was isolated is A. You can see it's very plain, and then the typical song is B on the right. So that it just indicates the importance of them being exposed to the parents and listening and learning. You can hear that here. Whoops. That's the normal white-crowned sparrow, adult. And that's the one that was isolated. Kind of sad. And then the gray catbird is one that they notice when they're reared in a lab, they're actually fine when they get out in the wild and they hear other birds. They don't need to learn it during that young song crystallization period because they're open-ended learners like mockingbirds. Most birds are age restricted and need to learn it while they're in that, that first 6 months of their lives. But a mockingbird, a lot of people have been hearing them recently on moonlit nights singing, and they'll learn other bird songs and sounds and just add this to their repertoire throughout their lives till they, can compose. They can do like 100 different songs. So they're amazing. If you listen to a mockingbird, you can learn about all the birds it's ever come in contact with, or know all of the neighborhood birds. So here's just some resources for you. Birdsong Hero is a fun game that's Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Merlin is an app a lot of you may be aware of. Larkwire is another one, and then the Academy allaboutbirds.org. Great learning resources to learn more about birds. They have a bird of paradise class that's really cool too, if you're interested in them and the craziness of evolution when birds don't have predators, what they end up looking like. So let's talk a little bit about avian life cycle. So they start out, of course, as an egg, so it makes a bird. Then they're a hatchling. Right out of the egg, nestling, fledgling means they've flown the coop. And then they're juvenile. That's the most dangerous part of a bird's life. 60% of birds actually don't make it through that juvenile stage. But if they do, then they've got a good chance. So this is a picture of our friends in the chimney here, that are nesting, and So about 19, 21 days after incubation, those guys will hatch. And then 28 days later, they will make their first flight out onto the farm here. And this is an aerial insectivore, so they're catching insects on the wing. And their nest is incredible. The female makes it with just twigs and her saliva, and it's cemented to the inside wall, just with her saliva that acts as super glue. So even just nests that these birds build and each species has a different kind of nest, uses different material. That alone is, amazing, all the diversity there. So passerines are what's known as altricial. So these are small eggs, small yolk. And so when it hatches, it's basically like a little fetus. And they're altricial means they're basically totally dependent and helpless for at least 2 weeks of their lives. So this is another very dangerous time in the nest. So generally you want to get out as fast as you can, often before you can fly, like the eastern bluebird. The chicks will leave at around day 17. But the parents will take care of them for, another week afterwards until they can fly successfully. And then even a month after that, they may be helping them as they're learning to hunt. So the eastern bluebird is one of the ones that will use nest cavities. Here's a little Cornell Lab of Ornithology glimpse into bluebird box. They're just hatching. About 14 days. So here you can see she eats the eggshells. That's what she's doing now, and that provides her with some extra calcium. Here's Dad. Trying to check out what's going on here. And he's feeding her. So it takes a lot of work for both parents, of course, to get these little tiny helpless chicks to fledge. There's a lot of different nesting strategies, even within that. So the Carolina wren, that's an open cup nester, so they won't use a bird box. They'll nest anywhere out in the open, in a planter, in a shoe, flower pot, and because they're more susceptible to predators out in the open, they need to fledge even faster. So they're at about, bluebird's about 17 days. Carolina wren will fledge at about 11 days. The yellow-billed cuckoo has the shortest rate of development of any altricial species of bird. And you can see in the upper right, that's the big egg is the cuckoo egg in comparison to yellow warbler eggs. So it's almost like an ostrich egg. So it's a better provisioned yolk. The chick hatches a little bit more advanced. And because this is a species that feeds on irregularly available food sources, like poisonous caterpillars, tent caterpillars, they need to be able to move around, lay their eggs, get them fledged quickly. So 7 days. Once the bird hatches in 9 days, and 7 days later it leaves. So and about day 2, they can see these guys snapping at flies at the edge of the nest. So pretty crazy. And the yellow-billed cuckoo is a really beautiful bird with a long speckled tail. And then our cardinal has the longest post-fledging parental care of any songbird. It's up to 56 days, which is, like a couple months. But if you think about the cardinal, they're so conspicuous. Again, those young need to get out of the nest pretty fast. So they leave at around day 9, also not able to fly for at least another week. So you can understand why the parents would need to take care of them for a long time after. But it's safer for them to leave the nest prematurely, then stay in that nest where they're sitting ducks. Only 15 to 37% of cardinal nests make it, because there are so many predators out there. This is a ruby-throated hummingbird nest. So they are exhibiting Batesian mimicry. So that on the left is a black flannel waved moth caterpillar. And it's a noxious North American caterpillar. And because the hummingbird lays such a tiny little egg, the young are really, really ultra-shrill. It takes 21 days for a tiny little hummingbird to fledge. So nature has offered it a little bit of protection in the first few days of life. They have these yellow hairs on them that resemble this poisonous caterpillar, and they think that evolution has designed that to protect it from predators. And there's so many nest predators, from snakes to raccoons to mice, skunk, even deer. You know, lots of predators that want to eat baby birds. And then the precocial birds, these are like the waterfowl and game birds. These are bigger eggs, and these guys are able to run right at hatching. And this is a brood parasite a lot of people ask about. I have a different egg in my nest. It's from the brown-headed cowbird. This is a native bird. They've advanced east from their western origins with human development. But she's got a really easy life. She just lays her eggs in other birds' nests and makes them take care of the bird. Generally, the cowbird outcompetes the actual birds, and those birds die, and then the mom doesn't know the difference, so she's taking care of the cowbird chick. So different life strategy. And then these are the convicts. These are both are non-native species that really in the early 20th century, they were really wreaking havoc on our cavity nesting populations. So they do need to be controlled. If you see a house sparrow using your bluebird box, you are to evict it, because it is not protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, because these are alien species that were introduced in the late 1800s. So mating systems really till like the 1960s, people thought that they had this romantic notion that birds were all monogamous. They mated for life. But now they know that it's really the exception rather than the rule, and they're all quite promiscuous generally. But one exception is the beautiful Laysan albatross. They meet their mates at dance parties in the Hawaiian Islands, and they mate for life. And so the oldest bird her name is Wisdom, and she's now 73 years old. I think she outlived her last mate, so she may have had to find another one. She even outlived the bander who banded her in the 1950s. But that is saying a lot, especially for a bird that has to deal with climate change is shifting ocean currents and making them have to fly further out for food. They have to watch out for longline fishing, all kinds of stuff. Did you have a question?
These birds that you're talking about, the 73-year-old bird,
Yeah.
are they fertile for life? Will she?
Yeah, she has, I think, 37 chicks, and she's still going. So imagine having kids at age 73. She just keeps going. They take a year off, so it's like every other year.
You know,
Generally, yeah, they don't like.
there's no such thing as men.
No bird applause. So ornithologists were traditionally really focused on the breeding grounds of birds, and now it's the full life cycle. So they've got these far-flung life cycles from the nest, juvenile dispersal. They spend a third of their lives in migration. So that's an important part. And then during migration, these small songbirds have to stop over. So you need to understand what habitat they need for these refueling sites as they're traveling. Then of course the breeding grounds and the wintering grounds. So trying to understand migratory connectivity is really important to conserving birds. For example, many of the thrushes, like this gray-cheeked thrush, use the mountains of northern Colombia as a stopover site before they launch across the Gulf up to their breeding grounds in North America. So understanding the connection between the breeding and the wintering grounds. Bird migration is the world's only true unifying natural phenomenon, stitching the continents together in a way that even the great weather systems fail to do. And Scott Weidensaul is another great author. If you want to learn more about bird migration, he's got a couple books. So generally our neotropical migrants, like this black-throated blue warbler, are flying, beating their wings through the night to get to their destination, because night is the atmosphere is more still, less predators. Some of them are using the stars. There's less chance of overheating. And then they'll touch down during the day to be able to refuel. So a lot of, you might wonder, if these are tropical birds spending their winters in the tropics, why would you leave? And there's a bunch of theories for that. One is there's less predators in the temperate zone. There may be less nest competition. But the big one is the great North American protein pulse. So our streams are fed by glacial soils. Rich, nutrient-dense waters give way to the emergence of aquatic insects that birds need to really raise their young. So that's why they come up north to breed in the temperate zones. And they have to go through these harrowing migrations. So the bar-tailed godwit has the longest nonstop migration of any bird ever been recorded. It breeds in Alaska, and the one that they put a satellite transmitter on left Alaska, and 11 days later was in its wintering grounds in New Zealand, and that's 7,500 miles nonstop, which is just unfathomable. And then, of course, a smaller bird like an American redstart doesn't have the fuel reserves to do something like that. Probably doesn't fly more than a night without needing to stop over. But a bird that is a third of an ounce, like a little warbler, can fly a couple hundred miles at a time, even them. The semi-palmated sandpiper.
That have longest migration.
Oh, did I say longest? Yeah, so this is the longest non-stop. Yeah, not necessarily the longest. That's a great, if I misspoke. Yeah, that's the longest non-stop recorded flight is the bar-tailed godwit. So then the semi-palmated sandpiper, they do what's the equivalent of 126 marathons nonstop. So 2,500 miles from the orange is the breeding grounds up in the Arctic tundra, and they go to South America, some 2,500 miles nonstop. This is a little shorebird. So birds are amazing. They have many adaptations that allow them to do this seemingly superhuman trait of migration. They have this unihemispheric sleep where one side of the brain can sleep while the other is awake. Their whole bodies change. They load up. They have this subcutaneous fat. When we have them in the hand, we can actually see that. A bird that is preparing for a long overnight flight will show that bright orange, which you can see the bird on the right. A full circular hollow, gas in the tank. The bird on the left does not have fat stores. So a bar-tailed godwit will double its weight in Alaska, fueling up on things like clams and worms before leaving for this 7,500 mile nonstop journey. And on the journey, they shrink all the organs that they don't need before the journey, like the stomach and the gizzard shrinks. And then they're bodybuilders, essentially. Their pectoral muscles double in size to be able to do this amazing feat. So birds are incredible. We love them, but they also have major functions in the ecosystem. Some of them are keystone species, seed dispersal, pollinators, insect control, scavengers, indicator species. So seed dispersal is like the corvids and jays. You can see them carrying acorns off, and they're regenerating forests. And pollinators like hummingbirds, many pollinators, especially in the tropics. The birds really help keep everything in check. If there weren't birds, there'd be more forest destruction and devastation from insects. One barn owl can eat 11,000 mice in its lifetime, which would decimate 13 tons of crops. Carcass removal, of course, without beautiful vultures, we would have dead things everywhere. Keystone species like the pileated woodpecker, they are able to carve out these large cavities that other birds rely on. We have 40 species of birds in North America that rely on woodpecker carpentry because they can't build their own nests. So they're called secondary nesters, like the little saw-whet owl on the right. And last but not least, indicator species. So the presence of certain species can show you your habitat quality. And the converse of that, the loss of birds, is indicating that our ecosystems are suffering. So we've gone from 10 billion birds to just 7 billion birds in less than one human lifetime. 30% decline. Many reasons. The number one is habitat loss. And a close second is actually cats. And then close third is all the chemicals and agricultural intensification, pesticides, as I mentioned with the chimney swifts. Insects are declining, and that it is no coincidence that the birds that eat them are declining. We mentioned collisions, many other different reasons, but migratory birds. So, like 2 in 5 Baltimore Orioles are lost since 1970. Barn swallows or aerial insectivores as well. So really ranging across all bird groups. None of them have really been spared, but especially things like the insectivores are declining. So a lot of solutions, and many involve habitat conservation, bird monitoring, banding, and really expediting bird conservation using technology. So bird banding is, we get our bands. This is just traditional. This is how you understand bird populations from a basic point of view. Many different band sizes. We get them from the government. We have a federal permit to do that. Takes place here at Rushton Woods Preserve. You can see that little metal band, just like a little bracelet, where we set up these mist nets during the day out in the hedgerow, where we know in the morning. So as the birds, so this is during migration, so the birds theoretically travel overnight, touch down in our early successional kind of shrub row habitat, and we'll set up the mist nets to be able to capture them kind of like that. We're all extensively trained in how to handle these birds safely and get them processed expedited in an expedited fashion. You can see that the band makes a perfect circle. It has a 9-digit number on it that forever makes that bird unique. Take down some other information like the wing cord. Again, looking at things like their body composition, blowing the feathers to see the percular hollow, to see that fat. Looking at the feathers to tell the age, and releasing the bird. So some of the things that we learn, everything ranging from species diversity to population dynamics. And I mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, an important part of what we do is connecting people to the birds here. So studying the diversity, and really what we're doing now is in our summer banding is understanding our breeding populations, which actually includes some of the Pennsylvania state responsibility species, like the scarlet tanager here, wood thrush, and worm-eating warbler on the lower right. So these are birds for which we play a critical role in securing their global population, because we have 10% of the North American population of these particular species. So studying things like stopover ecology. So we have, when you recapture a bird, you can understand how they're using your habitat. So for example, we caught a veery one time who in 8 days doubled her weight. So we know that she was able to use our habitat and it was providing what she needed to be able to make a long overnight journey. And then longevity, these are from the Institute for Bird Populations. They put us up on their social media page, and we got some old birds one summer. We had a veery who was 12 years old. We banded her the first year, and then some years in between, and then the last year making her 12 years old. And then also an 11-year-old ovenbird that's tied through the bird banding lab, which is where all of the information is housed. Our 11-year-old ovenbird is tied for the oldest known ovenbird through banding records. So you're understanding, you're getting to know some longevity, and you're seeing the site fidelity that these birds exhibit. So, these are birds that go to the tropics. every year and then come back to the same nesting site in Rush and Woods Preserve, able to pinpoint that on the map, which is pretty incredible. So one of the things we're seeing through our bird banding here is Central Park effect. So we do have so much development around us, and what we're noticing is a little uptick in our numbers. And that is, of course, not because birds are increasing. It's because they're getting funneled to our open space here because there's nowhere else around to go, is the theory of this Central Park effect. Mentioned the public at banding. But banding is lacking in a major part of the annual life cycle. You're not being able to get this migratory connectivity necessarily. It's really just for population studies, longevity, how they're using the preserve, and then all of these body indexes that you have in the hand. So over time, the recoveries, as we call them, either birds that we banded, songbirds that we banded that ended up at another station, and they were able to tell through the band number that we banded them first, or a bird that we got with a band that was not ours, and the banding lab told us where it was originally banded. But there's only 5 instances of those in the 14 years that we have been banding. So you don't get a whole lot of connect the dots to understand their movement across the landscape in this passive type of songbird banding. So again, trying to understand, we need to be able to spy on birds essentially to be able to conserve them in an expedited fashion. So that's where MODIS comes into play. And before you leave today, if you look out above the greenhouse, there's a tower that is a MODIS receiving tower. So MODIS is really the wave of the future. So that is an international network using coordinated automated radio telemetry to track the movement of animals across the landscape, even monarch butterflies to bats to birds. They're literally they can be down to 1/10 of a gram, these little radio transmitting battery powered tags that you attach to the bird with a leg loop harness. And then when they fly within 12 to 15 miles of a tower, it's automatically logged. You didn't have to catch the bird again through traditional bird banding techniques. And then you're able to, and you can all, I encourage you to go to modis.org. You can actually look up the Rushton Tower and see what tag birds have been flying by. You'll see a lot of wood thrush actually on there now, because we're participating in a national study putting nanotags on local breeding wood thrush populations. They're trying to understand why national declines are happening in wood thrush, so that they're close enough, obviously, to ping that tower as they're moving around the preserve. But that's a picture of the tag there. It's basically radio telemetry. So MODIS allows us to uncover migratory pathways and understand what is limiting bird populations in what part of that annual cycle, and conservation decisions in areas that are highest conservation priority. And then just to give you an idea of how much it's expediting things, since 1963, something like 3,000 gray-cheeked thrushes and Swainson's thrushes were banded in South America. Only 6 since have ever been recovered in North America. Whereas there was a study in 2016, 36 gray-cheeked thrushes were banded, and that spring 14 were recovered on the North American breeding grounds. So a lot of information being gleaned from that. And I'll show you here real quick. What did you ask?
I'm just curious how many of these stations are they being put in conservation centers around the country?
Yeah, they're all across the Northeast. Maybe that's not gonna. Oh, here we go. So you can see the birds coming to their North American breeding grounds. And so there's live maps, well, not live, but you can see some of these maps on modis.org. That really kind of helps it. come to life. And I mentioned the gray-cheeked thrushes, the one that left Colombia. Oh, maybe I didn't mention it yet. What Modus uncovered a record for the gray-cheeked thrush migration. It left Colombia and then was tagged or pinged a station in Indiana 3 days later, and that was 2,000 miles. So crazy. And they're finding through Modus that the condition that they leave their breeding grounds on, or their wintering grounds, affects breeding. If they are in poor habitat, stopping over to refuel, they may get to their breeding grounds like 10 days too late, which is significant for a bird. So Modus is helping to understand a lot about bird migration. I'm going to skip that video in the interest of time. So we'll be nano-tagging northern saw-whet owls to understand their habitat needs, wood thrush. We've been nano-tagging eastern towhees, which is a common species in decline because of loss of shrubland habitat, which is one of the, that's the habitat, especially around here, that people are like, that looks messy, let's just clear it. But it actually has huge value for birds, for young birds, learning how to make a living. For older birds, looking for fuel during migration, shrub habitat is very important. And so that leads into sort of what you guys can do. I'll just leave you with a few tips. So habitat is the biggest reason why birds are declining. So it's also the way that we can help them the most. So, our yards are places where conservation can happen. Why can't we make our yards look a little more like this? Plant native perennials or native, this is milkweed or shrubs. The more native plants we use in our managed landscapes, the more we can restore food webs. All of our insects rely on these native plants. And then, of course, the birds rely on the insects. So it all starts with native plants. And if you want to learn more about this really huge topic that's gaining traction, I would look up any of Doug Tallamy's books, Bringing Nature Home, Nature of Oaks. He's got a lot of really, and he also has a website, Homegrown National Park. He says if all of us converted just half of our lawns to native or even just unmowed areas or places for wildlife, then we could create a homegrown national park of 20 million acres. So there's some keystone plant species, 5% of our native species that drive 75% of the caterpillars that fuel the food webs. So that these are heavy hitters like your oak trees, cherries, willows, flowers include asters and goldenrod. So really great species, plant species to put in our yards that can help boost bird populations. Other things you can do is, of course, feeding birds, looking at our windows. So residential, so I mentioned collisions with buildings, but even residential areas is a big problem as well. Millions of birds, they estimate, which is probably an underestimate because they get picked off quickly by predators. But there's things like parachute cord that you can put on a residential window if you notice a lot of those thumps and birds dying during migration, because they just see a continuation of habitat. So the Acopian Bird Saver, that's a good website. They also have little decals that you can use in certain patterns. Keeping cats indoors. There's a lot of people are getting creative now, bird people. They're building catios. You can still let it be outside. There's cat collars because they found bells don't really work, but these big colorful collars that you can actually get from Amazon are pretty effective at preventing bird kills because they can see it a mile away, essentially. We've mentioned keeping bird boxes to help those cavity nesting species, or if you have a large property with dead trees, that's even better. The importance of that to other animals is hugely important. We have a motto, life is messy. The messier you can keep your yards, like leaving some of the leaves, dead trees, brush piles, the better. Of course, we're supporting regenerative agriculture. And if you want to learn more about our bird-friendly coffee initiative, you can grab, we've got a handout over there that tells about our bird-friendly coffee coalition. We're basically going out, trying to educate more roasters and merchants about this certification, which is in the upper right there. That's really the creme de la creme in terms of certifying the coffee. Shade grown isn't necessarily bird friendly because they might just have a couple eucalyptus trees above their coffee plants, but bird friendly, they go down and make sure that the coffee farm in the tropics is the coffee is growing in a tropical forest ecosystem, which is where a lot of our birds go to in the winter and rely on. And today, unfortunately, you know, there's the coffee belt. That's where all of our birds are going, and they rely on that habitat, which today 75% of coffee, the majority of 27 million acres, is grown on clear-cut coffee farms. And this kind of sun coffee came about in the 70s. So helping people to be conscientious of even things like their coffee can help bird habitat. So coffee traditionally wants to grow in a rainforest. And so supporting that Smithsonian certified coffee can help regenerate tropical forest and help our bird populations. So with that, I think, oh, the eBird, you can come ask me about eBird if you want to check that out at the end. But this is a great quote by Thomas Lovejoy. If you take care of birds, you take care of most of the big problems in the world. And I'm going to stop, let's see, stop the recording with that. Oh, and then of course, land conservation, supporting land conservation is going to be key to helping our bird populations today. Oops. I'm going to save that little video for after the recording ends. It's funny. So are there any questions? Sorry, I kept you a little later. Birds are an exciting topic.
The dinosaur ancestors of the birds, how big were they?
I think they were all different sizes. I mean, I understand there was a diversity overall, and everything started out big.
What would the biggest one be?
I'm not sure. Let's see. I don't know, Gwen.
Or any, all of the above.
Yeah, but there's a great, if you look up, what was the article? It was a Cornell Lab of Ornithology article. They had a whole article on that whole evolution of birds from dinosaurs. It's really, really fascinating.
Thank you.
You mentioned sparrows, which we have a ton of.
House sparrows,
Here,
where do you
yeah.
live? In a
They're
neighborhood?
Evertown, and they just.
Yeah, they like the earth, wherever there's human buildings, they
So
congregate.
we're feeding them and feeding other birds that come as well, but is there any way to, that you know?
And the feeding unfortunately kind of attracts them, obviously more. Do you have bird boxes?
We do.
Do they nest in the bird boxes?
We know, right? Wrens in the bird box.
Yeah, if they do, you're supposed to clear them out, and you can, and they're not protected, so, you know, it's actually illegal to clear out a native bird's nest, but the house sparrow, you can throw out the eggs. Whatever you have a heart to do. I know it's hard because they are birds, but they, once you see the destruction that they can do to bluebirds, you have an easier time disposing of them.
Bluebirds.
They will.
Birds.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's like the house sparrows, like in the city, they're probably not wreaking havoc on cavity nesters, because there's not that many native cavity nesters in the city. But they are very, they'll go in and they'll murder adult bluebirds. They're very smart. There's YouTube videos which you don't want to watch, but the female will stay on the outside as the male goes in, so she'll trap the bird inside from exiting while he does the deed with his beak. So it's rough. But you know, it's all competition over these cavities that are not as numerous as they used to be, and then of course the house sparrow is a extra species that wasn't here before, so it's just wildlife management.
So the house sparrow, if you can't find a cavity, it's still gonna be able to produce, right? Because they produce in such vast numbers, they're succeeding somehow without cavities.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I have tons of them.
They'll put like running shed, horse running sheds, I think, like, but they do need cavities, so, but even like under eaves, they could use as a cavity or in any crevice. But yeah, a lot of times they are. But sometimes, you know, if a a bluebird box trail goes unmonitored, that can be a source for house sparrows. If nobody's monitoring it and house sparrows are moved in and they're so prolific, then they radiate out from there, looking for other houses.
So in the bluebird boxes, do both adults fit in there, or will they occupy a box at the same time, for the male and female adult?
Male and female bluebirds in the box.
Bluebirds, right, yeah.
Yeah, actually that Cornell nest cam video I cut off in the interest of time, but you can see actually the male goes in, they're both in there at the same time. Yeah, it's a little claustrophobic to me, but. But yeah, they can both fit in there. Some of those nest cam videos are pretty fascinating to watch.
So we have had birds, and we have a camp. We've seen, we're, I guess, on the second and third, time we've seen. birds,
Yeah.
But we never see them leave
Never see them leave the
the
box.
nest, like one day they're gone.
Oh,
what do
fledged,
you-
yeah.
So when did they fledge, and then are you telling me, I just assumed that, my God, they didn't drop and hit the, right, this is the driveway, right?
Yeah.
None of them ever are dead, so.
Yeah, I mean,
they're
they don't just like drop, they can flutter a little and like clamber up trees and so they, you know, they don't just fall out of the box and get smushed.
And do
They-
most of the parents stay with them in most cases, like?
A lot of times, like with the bluebirds, what'll happen, is both parents will take care of the chicks once they leave the nest for a couple days. Like a week, and then she might get busy already on the second brood, building a new nest, while he continues to take care of and feed the chicks that have fledged. Help them learn how to, yeah, so like the tag teaming is very important for birds.
And it's pretty much across species, this isn't just you mentioned bluebirds. this is
Pretty
happening.
much most songbirds.
Stick with them until the
Yeah, but
kids
they're,
really know what they're doing.
Yep. Yeah, and so that's why in the summertime, we get a lot of calls, especially around the 4th of July, where people will say, I found this baby bird, and I think he's been left, he can't fly, and we tell them just leave it alone, the parents are nearby, I'm sure, generally the parents are nearby, and the bird is not abandoned, so a lot of baby birds get kidnapped in the summer because people think that it should be able to fly, it's a bird, should fly, even though it's baby, but, so. A lot of kidnappings, a lot of wildlife rehab centers get kidnapped baby birds.
Can I ask you a strange question? You touched on the 4th of July. So near me, there's 2 parks and they have a fireworks show every 4th of July. And I'm in this park every day. It's Wilson Farm Park over near Valley Forge. It is loaded with wildlife, especially birds. And, you know, different variations, different stages of development and all that. But this fireworks show we're going for a half hour, it is horrific, and the only thing I can think of is what it's doing to birds and nests.
I
to
know,
birds
I
and
would
animals.
love
I
to.
mean, it's just,
Yeah.
So,
Wildlife.
does it, it's so loud, and they're like little developing brains and.
Oh, the baby, I never thought of that.
Yeah, I want to imagine it's gotta be damaging to some degree, I don't know. And in talking
I don't know if
about,
there's any research on that.
well, that's just it, I'm not, strangely enough, I'm not alone with these thoughts, cause I talked to people
Yeah.
in the park and I know, they have the same concerns I do.
Yeah, yeah, you can hear birds like chirping at night, even if when they hear it, but, I mean, I guess it's not hugely detrimental unless they fly, unless they're so scared they fly out of the roost.
So they launched the, fireworks from in the woods up to an area like fields, so like it's a street, from the street that goes through. an area that is loaded with nests. It's
Yeah.
really lonesome. I don't know, it's a horrible scene, I just thought you might have.
Yeah, well, I guess the best way to monitor the effects of that would be if there's boxes that you can look inside, like the bluebird boxes. And that's the best way of getting a glimpse into what's going on.
Yeah, there's no boxes, it's just all. wild.
Yeah, so you wouldn't be able to, but it would be interesting to see. But yeah, I don't know. That's a
Yeah, I would like for them to stop.
question for Google AI. I guess.
Like, thank you so much for this, I have to run, but yeah, because I'm here all the time, and there's stuff on this presentation that was new to me
Good.
the first time.
Good.
It was great, thank you so much.
You're welcome, and hopefully the recording was successful. And there are, if you wanna, there's, stuff for the coffee over there, native plant handout, and then there's one of our 10-year report. There should be one for everyone on the left, that booklet. If you wanna learn more about what we learned through, bird banding here at Rushton Farm, so a whole report.
No, it was out.
Those didn't get emailed out. No, yeah, you're probably mistaking it for our Sycamore magazine.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jennifer. All right, so I'm gonna stop this recording here.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
And